Is Franz? They loved you so much they had to have you back immediately.
It's been a month.
That's immediate in
Yeah,
FDA terms.
that's true. And in actually being able to sell your medical device terms, which we'll all talk about here in a few minutes. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for joining.
And
So,
what will your talk title be in a few weeks?
oh, wait a minute. I thought I'm talking today.
Oh, you are. But now I'm talking about in person in California when you're with us.
Oh, I'm going to be leading a workshop on basically a lot of what we're talking about now and working through both the pitfalls, talking about things that can go wrong, but also giving you the tips for success and how to strategically navigate through those,
Hey,
based on real world experience, not chat GPT experience. GPT definitely has its place, but it's never brought a medical device to market before. So
not
that's
yet.
not yet. It will someday, but not now.
Okay. You have slides to share with us?
I do. I do. So Michelle and I were on a couple of weeks. It was actually exactly a month ago. It was February 21st. And we really talked about the pitfalls from concept to commercialization. And we focused in that session on product development, really the importance of identifying user needs, function needs, regulatory needs upfront, your regulatory strategy, all the things that can go wrong, and then design for manufacturability. So we've covered all of that. Any of you who are interested in that information, we have a master class that we did early February. And I guess, I don't know, Joe, should they drop their name in the chat if they want access to that to get more information? Because I'm just going to talk about commercialization today. I'm not going to touch on those things.
By all means, if there's anything you want as a follow-up, just communicate it. And Sean has been doing a great job with you guys with your outreach and your marketing communication.
Yes.
So he's your guy to make sure you get what you ask.
Okay, great. So now I'm gonna jump into commercialization. Many people who are new to med tech, and I think there's 18 people on the call. I'm not sure what your experience is, but what I find working with most startups that are new to med tech is they think I have my market clearance. I've just spent 5, 10, 15 years getting my product to market or getting it developed. I have clearance and now I'm at the end of this race and the money's just going to start flowing in. I am here to tell you, and I hate to be the messenger of this, but for most people, I would say 95% of medical devices, getting to that point is not the end. It's just the very beginning. And we're going to talk about why and the ways that you can navigate the pitfalls and successfully get your device to be in a more accelerated time frame in being successful, actually generating revenue. So I don't know why I'm having trouble here. Here we go. All right. So one of the really important pieces, which I think everybody knows, is having a sales strategy. So even when you're in the process of doing product development, regulatory work, you need to be thinking about how am I really going to sell this product and start forming relationships with entities that you think would best represent it in the market. The other thing that you need to be doing, and it sounds like, I'm sorry, I missed the person that was just talking at the very beginning, who was talking about the sleep apnea device. It sounds like you've kind of already started that journey, working with entities to test the device. So you start to build champions and key opinion leaders early. So what does it look like then to open up a sales channel in the medical device world? And I'm going to mostly focus on hospitals because that's where most of the revenue goes. But if you have questions about acute care, long-term care, home health, I'm happy to answer those as well. But much of the sales process that I'm going to talk about also applies to those organizations. So when you're a startup and you have limited funds, My recommendation is not to go with forming your own sales organization. Why is that? It's really expensive. If you're going to commercialize here in the US, we're a big country. And one of the keys to successfully selling is having good reach and frequency. And so, in order for a startup to have good reach and frequency with their own sales organization, you're looking at hiring a minimum of 10 people, better off having at least 30 people. So you think about the salary of 30 salespeople, which is probably around 100,000 a year now, plus commission, plus their travel. Plus, the other piece I'm going to talk about is credentialing, because that actually plays into some of the other things that we'll be talking about later, the credentialing process for them. So it used to be 25, 30 years ago when I started in this industry, you could just walk into a hospital anytime, anywhere, talk to a clinician, they like your product, they place an order. It is not like that anymore. And one of the things that has really become prevalent in the past decade has been this credentialing process. So for a sales rep to set foot in a hospital now, they have to be credentialed with some, usually multiple national organizations, but also many hospital systems are requiring additional credentialing and money out of your pocket to allow them to set foot in your hospital. So it will cost you thousands of dollars a year and a lot of paperwork for each rep on top of their salaries if you try to do this with your own sales force. So what I recommend for a startup is one of the three things. Go with a distributor, a 1099 sales representative, or a mixture of the two, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, or a strategic partner. So a distributor, for those of you who aren't aware, is somebody that not only sells your product, but they also warehouse and ship it for you. So why is that important? Well, as a startup, it's really nice to have an organization that, first of all, has to buy the product and stock it. So you get some initial orders from them. At least that's my recommendation when you set up the relationship, is to make sure that they buy a certain amount of product. So they're invested upfront and you get some sales. But then they do all the transacting on your behalf. So in addition to sales reps needing to be credentialed, vendors also now have to go through a credentialing process. And for some hospital systems, not only is it a lot of paperwork, but also it can cost you upwards of $50,000 a year just to have the pleasure of being able to sell to them. So that's really not an expense that you would want to take on, I would imagine, as a startup, unless you're flush with cash. So a distributor handles all of that for you. They're going to sell the product, they're going to warehouse it, and they're going to invoice for you. So the way that distributors are set up here, you can either have a master distributor that covers the whole US, or regional distributors that you can piece together for your sales organization. Something else that I strongly recommend before you actually launch your product in your vetting sales organizations, find one that is a specialty distributor in your niche. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you have a product that's focused on the NICU, for example, you want a specialty distribution organization that calls on the NICU. You don't want to be sending a general surgery product in with a NICU sales force. It sounds pretty basic, but it's really important. The other thing that you need to be thinking about with distributors, and this also plays into maybe bringing in some 1099 sales representatives, I strongly suggest having them break out in your contract by region minimums, because well, first of all, I guess I should back up. My recommendation is, with a sales organization, even though it might be uncomfortable at first, to make them exclusive, but give them minimums and break it down by region. And the reason that I recommend going initially with exclusivity is it takes a long time to get your first sale. It's very expensive for the distribution organization to do it. And guess what? If they're not exclusive, they're not going to put the time and effort in it, because they could put 2 years into the sale and then someone else could come out from underneath them and steal it. So they're going to work harder for you if you make them exclusive, but the balance to that is you need to put boundaries around it and say, okay, I'm going to make you exclusive. And depending on the market, and we'll talk more about this later, you may want to say, we'll negotiate what those minimums are, because you might have a product that a hospital's never bought before, so it's difficult to negotiate those up front. Or you may say, you're going to have to sell this amount in the next 6 months. So there's some flexibility there, but I strongly recommend, whether it's a distributor, sales representative, 1099 sales rep, do it by region, because again, this is a big country. And here's a pitfall I've seen happen, where you negotiate exclusivity with a distributor and you have a couple of regions that are performing well. You always have your key performers, and then you have some that are just bottom of the barrel. And if your agreement covers the whole country with one minimum, you cannot get out of those bottom of the barrel. And the bottom of the barrel sales reps may be in highly populated regions like New England or California, where you really want a high performing sales rep. And so if you do your minimums by region, you have the flexibility as you revisit the contract. And I recommend doing, maybe putting it in at least every 6 months in the beginning, and then once a year, once you're established, to say, you know what, New England's not performing. I want a new sales channel there. And that's where you have the flexibility to say, okay, I'm either going to bring in a regional distributor, or I'm going to cover that with 1099 sales representatives. So that's a really important piece. I've had to go through that before with clients, and it's really painful if it's not spelled out, especially if the distributor is just performing well overall, but not performing at all in key regions. So talked about distributors, 1099 sales representatives. So 1099 sales representatives will sell the product for you, but they will not warehouse it. They will not invoice it. You pay them less of a percentage than you would a master distributor, but you're still going to have to find a place to warehouse and actually ship and invoice your product. So, you know, some folks like to put together a 1099 sales force to cover the entire country. I recommend actually going in with distributors that can warehouse and invoice your product. And then where they don't have coverage, or where I mentioned they might be failing in areas, bring in a 1099 sales rep to cover those areas. The third way to sell your product is, for a startup, is to find a really good strategic partner. So let's say you have a really novel wound care product and you find someone like, I'm just going to throw it out there, Essity, and they're already selling into wound care. They have the right call point. Your product is different enough that they're interested in selling it. And it also is exciting to the sales reps, because they're typically going in and talking about the same things all the time. So you're giving them a new product to sell in a space that also can become for you a strategic exit. So if it looks like there's a company out there that's playing in your space that you think, yeah, they could really benefit from being my distributor, essentially, I would work to get into those companies and see if they'll sell your product, and then eventually they may become your strategic exit partner. Any questions about these sales channels before I move on to the box movers?
Renae, can I, I'm just going to give some color commentary on like the quality side of this.
Yeah.
Well, first thing, you know, you brought up all the different states. It's important to know there are states that require you to list your device in their state. So these are things that need to be thought about and planned for. And the right time to do it is in your initial design planning, is to define all of your distribution options and make sure your quality system can support all of those. You know, a project that you and I worked on back when we were in industry together, you know, I had one of the sales reps, after we had gotten clearance for his device, he said, he's like, I was like, where do you want to sell this? And he's like, you know, globally. well, okay, that ship sailed, you know? So, and all of these people are also considered your, like, or your suppliers. So they need to be on your supplier list. And depending on what they do, you may need to also audit them and do performance reviews. And you for sure need to train them on your complaint process so that they know what to document and elevate. So these things aren't just important from a commercialization in a business, but they're also important from a quality and regulatory perspective.
I like the globally answer. Where do you want to sell? Everywhere to everyone.
Yeah,
Well,
they
and
need
actually,
this
I
in
wanna put the
Timbuktu.
caveat- I want to put the caveat, I'm only talking about the US right now. I am not talking about other markets, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's true. I want to sell everywhere. Well, that's a whole different story. Well,
Mhm.
we can spend 8 hours talking about that.
Excuse me, can I have a question?
Sure.
I tried to raise my hand, but I couldn't find the little icon.
Oh.
Sorry. So I just want to make sure I understand what Michelle Lott is saying. So as a manufacturer, if you already registered with FDA and also you have all your product, including model, listed on your listings, does that include all 50 states? And then when you find a distributor, say they are in Florida, and then if they do decide to market your product, should they also add that model on the listing? So I'm not quite sure how detailed, to what extent the listing need to be done from the manufacturer side and the distributor side.
Yep.
If I could just clarify something up front, when I'm talking distributor here, I don't mean like a contract manufacturer that might either hold the product and ship it out to your sales distributor. I'm talking about the actual sales distributor themselves. So Michelle, that might play a part in how you're going to answer.
Mhm. So, Michelle, the FDA does not require any of these people to register and list themselves, but they are suppliers to you. So you're, as long as you have your listing, your contract manufacturer listing, if your company, and if your company is based outside of the US, then you need a US agent. That's all you need. And the rest of this is controlled through your supplier controls and verifications.
Okay.
Does that?
That makes life a little easier. So
Yes, exactly.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle and Michelle. Any other questions before we move on to what I affectionately call the box movers? Okay, so a lot of times folks will come to me and say, I'd really like to have Cardinal, McKesson, one of those big companies sell my product. And we affectionately call those companies, they're very important to hospitals for just-in-time delivery and inventory management. However, they sell thousands and thousands of products. And to have them be your only sales presence would not benefit a new product that's, not a me too, that needs a lot of time spent on it with clinicians in the market. So the way to work with the Cardinals and the McKessons when you're a small company and you're launching a new technology is to work with your specialty sales organization, however you've set it up. We've talked about that already. And then you put the onus on them to actually, when they sell the product, be able to sell it to Cardinal and McKesson. So Cardinal and McKesson, they can manage that inventory in and out of the hospital. And that comes out of your distributor's margin, not out of yours. So any questions about the box movers, Cardinals and McKessons? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual healthcare system structure, which is primarily when you're talking about hospitals, clinics, outpatient surgery centers, IDNs, or integrated delivery networks, which would be, maybe in the East, there's Wellstar, there's Centera. Out here in the West, we have Kaiser, St. Joseph's, Banner. Those are all integrated networks, and they're they behave very differently, but it's important to understand how each one works and how to navigate through them so that you can successfully get your product sold. The other piece that's important to understand, and it rolls up under IDNs, would be group purchasing organizations. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, oh, I really need to get on Health Trust right away or Vizient. And that may be the case, especially if you're what I call a Me Too product. And we're going to talk about that more here in a minute. But when I say Me Too, I don't mean that you're not special, you are, but the hospital's already buying a product in that category. So it would probably benefit you to be part of a group purchasing organization because they give priority to the products the hospital does that are on their GPOs. And the GPO that is, the three biggest are Health Trust, Vizient, and Premier. And the biggest, most compliant one is Health Trust. So if you're a product, you fit into a category that hospitals are already purchasing, and you're trying to get into a Health Trust account, you're going to have to be on that GPO. So what does that look like? So again, if you're this, what I call a Me Too product, so maybe you are an enteral feeding tube that has some additional benefits, or a wound dressing that can show you can heal a wound faster and better antimicrobial products. Hospitals are already buying those, and it typically is a lot easier to get into an integrated delivery network or an IDN. That being said, it's still a long process. So why is that? Well, I talked about how years ago you could just pop into a hospital, meet with the clinician, they liked your product, the next day you'd have a purchase order. Well, now we've come a long way. And if somebody's interested in your product, you first have to develop a champion within the hospital. And you really lean on your sales organization for that. And one thing I didn't mention about the sales organization, but this is actually something that I do that's very successful, is when you get your sales organization put together, you identify your top 5 people. You can do that by either asking the sales leadership, hey, who are your top 5? Or you'll get a sense as you go through training and you work with them. But the reason you do that is because you need to have these champions that are out there that have good relationships with these hospitals that can really get you in the door. And you will find when you can get out and you travel as much as you can with these top 5, sales folks like to show off. So you're going out to travel with them. They're going to get you in front of as many hospital leaders as they can because they want to look good. And the other thing that happens is you're the expert on the product. Even if you have a specialty sales organization, they have a number of products in their bag, and they're not going to necessarily focus on your product unless you're out there with them and you can show them how they can make money because they're coin operated. So picking your top 5 and really nurturing those relationships helps you as you go into these hospital purchasing systems. So you've got your top 5, you're working with them, and you're going into these IDNs. The first thing you're going to need to do is work to get on value analysis committee. So that's what almost every hospital now that's large takes your product through. So depending on how urgent they perceive your product's need to be, this is where the timing comes in terms of your turnaround on sales. It could be, it takes you a month to get on value analysis, or it could take you 6 months. So now you've got your hospital champion working for you. You've got your really good sales rep and they're working for you, and they're pushing the hospital as much as they can. Let's say 6 months later, you get on value analysis and they like your product and they say, okay, now we want to do an evaluation. So now they have to organize that, get some cases through IRB. That could be another 6 months. So now we're at a year. They do the evaluation, and in many cases, you have to get back onto value analysis. That could take another 6 months. So what I'm telling you here is don't be frustrated when you get market clearance and you think you're ready to sell and it takes you 2 years for a Me Too product to get your first sale. I had a client in Texas, got the Mayo Clinic on board, took a couple years. They got their okay to sell this product to all the Mayo clinics. And it took from the time the hospital said okay till they got their first purchase order a year. So the bureaucracy with these IDNs, especially as they're growing and buying more hospitals, is just making the sales process more arduous. So that's what it looks like to get in with a Me Too product. If you have a new innovative technology, and when I say new and innovative, I mean something that the hospital's never seen before, there's no direct replacement for it, it's at least 5 to 7 years. And there's a lot of things that you need to do right and right away to be successful getting it to market. So in that case, you know, you need to think about the fact that, okay, I have this new innovative product, and I'm going to use one that we worked on about 10 years ago, and it was to confirm enteral feeding tube placement as an example. So enteral feeding tubes, for many years, the standard was to blow bubbles into the tube and listen with a stethoscope over the stomach to determine whether it was in the stomach or not. And published studies were showing that up to 30% of those tubes placed with that method, especially in kids, were not in the stomach. And a high percentage of people, unfortunately, were dying from it. But when they did autopsies, they wouldn't show that they died from a misplaced feeding tube. They would just say that the heart had stopped. So we had to work to change global and national policies to have standards that then we could go into the hospital with and say, okay, no more blowing air bubbles into feeding tubes. pH is now the gold standard. And guess what? We have the only FDA cleared product that uses pH to confirm nasogastric tube placement. So we had to work alongside of doing trade shows, clinical evaluations with key opinion leaders and interested parties to create global and national alerts and standards around this issue. And I'm telling you this because I work with a number of people, particularly in the patient safety space, that have phenomenal products that we know will really change and save people's lives. But hospitals are so strapped for cash right now that unless you are a product that they're already buying and you're replacing something that they perceive as free, you will have, your adoption will be more than 5 to 7 years. It'll probably be 10 years or more, and you might be out of the market. So it's really, really key that you develop those relationships and you develop a whole strategy globally and nationally that says, hey, you know, there's warnings, don't use auscultation, don't, you know, blow air bubbles into the stomach, and use pH. That's one example. So any
Renae,
questions on?
before you go on, from a regulatory perspective, the top one, Me Too, means you are substantially equivalent, which means that it's going to be likely a 510K or even 510K exempt. When you say innovative, the FDA immediately thinks de novo. So it's like this real tightrope, and this is why it's so important for regulatory and marketing to align very early in the development process over claims, because usually as soon as they get clearance, marketing people start throwing out all kinds of wild stuff like better than, twice as fast, like all these things. And then the FDA does troll the internet and websites to see what people are doing with their claims and promotions.
We're
So
not
this is
all
just
bad,
another
Michelle.
example of how you guys really have to work together to be successful in the market, and that regulatory is your strategic partner and not a necessary evil for you.
I
Yeah,
can actually,
there's your friend.
yeah, I can actually attest my very last FDA inspection, which was last January, excuse me. And they actually looked at social media. They were looking at my social media procedure. They were looking at social media posts. They were asking questions about social media. So if anybody has any doubt that they're trolling, I can attest that they're actually doing it. We spent an hour on it.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Michelle. This is a good ad. So other considerations, and this is actually something you need to consider early on in your design phase as you look for contract manufacturers. If you, for example, want to sell your product to the Department of Defense, it has to be manufactured in a free trade zone. So we've highlighted here the current free trade zones, and that's really important.
Used to be, we have no idea what's happening now with the free trade zones.
Exactly. Right now, these are free trade zones. I don't know what that's going to look like next week or next month, but that's really critical because let's say a lot of your strategy is to sell to the Department of Defense, but you're making your product outside of a free trade zone. You're going to have to qualify a whole new contract manufacturer and go through that process because they will not buy that from you.
Renee, you mean the manufacturer putting together, but I can get parts from China.
Yes, that's a good clarification, Joe. You can get parts from China, Pakistan. You can get your
Yes, got it.
assemblies even, but your final assembly packaging needs to be done in a free trade country.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions on this piece? No? You guys are awfully quiet. Intellectual property. This one's really important. Definitely protect early and often, and there's a strategy to it. So there's really 4 ways that you can protect your technology. You can, go with what I call the umbrella, the utility patent that covers the basic concept of it. That's the strongest. You can go with design patents. Design patents are great once you hopefully have been able to get a utility patent, because a design patent then solidifies, okay, this is exactly what the design looks like and nobody can copy it. Then there's trademarks. Those are important, especially when you're building a brand, to trademark it. And then the last piece would be trade secrets. So there are certain things that you may decide they're important enough. I don't want to go through the patent process and teach people how to do this. We're going to maintain this as a trade secret. So you need to be considering all 4 of those things as you go through protecting your IP. Something that I want to note that I've seen as an issue with people who start their medical device journey in design, a lot of times do the right thing and they protect the design right up front. Well, as you evolve in product development, you get feedback from key opinion leaders. That device, 99% of the time, is going to change somewhat. And a lot of the time, it changes significantly enough that by the time you go to launch your product 5, 10, 15 years later, those patents and that IP does not cover the device that you're launching. So I can think of at least a handful of times I've worked with a client where we were getting ready to launch and I said, "Ooh, can I take a look at your claims?" And the claims were so different. They were different enough that we were about to launch a medical device that was so different that the IP wasn't going to cover it sufficiently. So we had to file what's called a provisional right away because it's first to file now, it's not first to invent. So we had to file a provisional, make sure all of that documentation was in place, and then launch the product. And Kevin, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the patent decision as far as when do you file. It's also sometimes, though, driven by the financing needs. We had that ourselves where one of our early angel investors basically was pushing us to file. And it's actually kind of hurt us. I think we filed too early, where we're now trying to race to come up with additional filings to cover us because, we've basically lost 10 years on our patent life along the way because it's taken us a lot longer than anticipated to get to commercialization. So
Yeah.
that's something that's also, has to be a discussion on the financing side. But I think it's also, people's thinking on patent versus making something just trade secret is also being affected just by the way patent litigation is happening right now. And it's quite frankly a lot harder to defend a lot of things anyway, just because of the way the patent courts are working.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that, Kevin. Nellie, I see your hands up.
Actually, Michelle's going to know exactly about this story. So I actually had a client who thought they could. So what they wanted to do is they were literally giving their IP away, and I begged them. It took me months, and thank God I actually got through. But they were going to let their contract manufacturer release the designs, file the 510K, and then they thought, oh, a year later we'll file the 510K ourselves. And I'm like, you're losing your entire. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I got on the phone with Michelle. So don't short circuit yourself trying to get to market fast, thinking you're going to be able to recover your IP by putting it into the contract manufacturer. You're doing this, and I'm like, seriously, ask Michelle. I was like, am I crazy? This is the wrong thing.
Well,
Like,
she
no.
did. We did a lot of reality checks on that one. Like, who's the crazy one in this relationship?
Yeah, seriously, they
In
thought
that case, it was not Nellie.
most cases it's me, but yeah, you know, this is like, I can't. Yeah, so be careful on your IP. Trust the people who are telling you how to protect your IP, because you could give it away and not know you're giving it away.
Yes, and actually to add to that, Nellie, I've encountered situations with clients where they've said to their contract design and developer, you're registered as my specification developer, you're registered as my contract manufacturer, you own my design history files, you own all of this. And then trying to pull that out, if the relationship goes sour and you don't want to use them, is a nightmare.
I actually, as the management rep from all my clients, because they all outsource design control and contract manufacturing, I make them whatever that contract manufacturer releases, we release in-house. They hate it. They go, Nellie, it costs money. I go, I don't care. I go, do you know how many divorces happen between contract manufacturers and manufacturing companies? They go, no. I go, it happens all the time. And then you lose your information because they own the documentation, you don't. I mean, it's the one thing I fight with my clients the most on is that I make them set up a dual doc control system when it comes to that.
That's spot on. That's exactly what they need. The other thing that I've seen happen, we're getting a little off track because this isn't IP, but it is part of making your device, is I've seen people enter into relationships with contract manufacturers and they spend hundreds of thousands, sometimes close to $1 million on their tooling. And they don't identify in the supply agreement right up front, like who owns what tooling. So they go to move away from that contract manufacturer and the contract manufacturer is like, that's ours. Well, now they've got to go spend all that money again for tooling. And so you need to call things like that out in your supply agreement. It needs to be in a living appendix that you can update every time you build new molds or tools. Make sure that you own them as the company and the
So
contract.
Renae, what I do is I have the client purchase the tooling, put it on their equipment form, and then do an internal transfer on loan. That way we have internal documentation that shows that that tooling is owned by the company, and it gets labeled with our calibration, but then we transfer responsibility of the calibration and maintenance to the CM until we return it back. Is that a good method, or do you like the?
Oh yeah, as long as it's spelled out in a contract and both parties agree that that's.
I don't think we didn't. That's not one thing. I think I'm going to update that. I don't think we've actually spelled that out, but I think thank you. That's a good add. I've been doing it through the equipment procedure, not through the contract, but.
Okay. Yeah, I do through the supply agreement and then the quality agreement. Michelle, I'm sorry. I keep.
Yeah. Not to beat a dead horse here, but I might have mentioned you need to think about claims early. You need to think about product features early and how they impact your regulatory strategy. In this particular example with patent, this was a customer that she got a patent before she even knew what was required for her device. And in her patent, they wrote in that it had an antimicrobial barrier to it for this mask, And FDA said, or not FDA, but she couldn't bring it to market because a mask that it contains a microbial thing has about $500,000 worth of biocompatibility testing. So, but she couldn't take that feature off because then she would not be under her patent, and then if anybody could copy it. So she's stuck because from a regulatory perspective, she built in something that wasn't even needed. She just put all the bells and whistles in her patent, and now she's been unable to bring her product to market.
Bruce, you're off camera, but I'm wondering if as a clean room person, you have anything to add here. He may have stepped away, so let's continue unless he shows.
Okay. Yeah, that's another really good point. And that actually is where, you know, let's say you have that baseline IP, like Michelle's client had, and you realize that the product that you're bringing to market, like you're not going to do the antimicrobial thing. If you have the funds and the opportunity to do so, it would work with your patent attorney to come up with a subsequent, you know, follow-on patent filing that's more specific to the design that you're actually going to be bringing to market. But again, do that before you actually put your product out in the public domain, because it's first to file, not first to invent. Any other questions or conversations about IP from a commercialization perspective?
I think I can add a little bit to it. It's not only that you lose some years when you file and you're not ready yet to market, but also on the end of your patent, if you're near the 25 years, it becomes less valuable because it becomes easier for other parties to infringe. Like for instance, our product is way old, but even before the patent was ended, it was infringed by an Austrian party, and it was too costly to go to court to fight them for just 1 year of production. So in the end of the IP, the patent protection, it wasn't as strong as it was in the beginning.
Yeah, and actually, thank you for bringing that up, because if you do have the funds and the ability to continue to protect your product along the way, you may be able to avoid like that, what the incident that you guys got into with the patent expiring. Because if you're able to change the features just enough and continue the patent process, in some cases, you may be able to extend the life of the protection every time that you file and are granted a patent, but it's expensive.
That's what we're doing right now. We're adding more patents to it.
Yeah.
Yes, and that works.
Yes. Yeah.
Could I ask a question? This is Paul. I see this workflow. I love this slide, and I was just wanting to ask, how do you, because you know, with what Michelle is doing as an offering, how do you help one of your clients stay in sync with all the regulatory and compliance guidelines? Is there is there a platform, checks and balances, a Gantt chart that is productized into an offering, and then you get like a checklist? We're doing this first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and all the moving pieces. Simple thing. Hey, you know, they get a new supplier for you know, with my supply chain background, right? They get a new supplier for a component. That supplier's got to now do the documentation and stuff. How do you all keep track of all that for your clients? How do your clients keep track of that? Is there a framework of like a platform, an app, or something like that?
Michelle, do you want to answer that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. What was the
Well,
question?
basically, how would we at Lean help keep a client compliant all the way through? Like they've launched their product, now they might be facing supplier audits, supplier changes.
I think that this is one area where Lean really stands apart from a lot of other firms, is that if you engage us very early, and I mean very early, and we do an initial regulatory pathway assessment, it can inform the whole rest of the process, not just from the regulatory perspective, but, you know, Renae could read that RPA as the business and commercialization side very early on, and she immediately has insight to the rest of these areas that need to be covered. So by me getting Renae's feedback from the business side and mine from the regulatory, it is going to be the fastest and most accurate way to get to market. Does that make sense? Like-
Yes, and that's the question, right? From the regulatory standpoint, are you offering that because you have it in your mind and you've got a is that document functional, operational? Is it a platform, or they keep coming back to you? How do you monitor? Are they staying in compliance, especially when on the commercialization side, right? Because somebody down the line might say, "Hey, I need a new supplier," and just want to go to make sure they don't delay the production, but not keep track of the regulatory. How does that follow through? How is those checks and balances happening? Are you doing reports? Are you doing regular audits, or is there a platform? Or is it just documentation that you are then having conversations with clients about?
So usually, and this is not what should happen, but usually what does happen is they get that RPA, they value the RPA, then they go out and raise funds and show that RPA in the due diligence. But unfortunately, they will go away and fundraising can take forever.
Right.
And at the same time, they're moving to what they think is their prototype. Because they don't have money, they only invest in that product side. And so then by the time they come back to me, they have made changes that totally invalidate the RPA that they raised money for.
Right.
And so it really needs the best clients that are most successful are consistent communicators about where they are, not only in the investment process, but what did they do? And it doesn't mean that I have to spend a lot of time or their money on it. It's just tell me, so I'm
Do
not
you offer them
surprised.
a timeline, a schedule of
The
audits?
RPA generally maps out what should be next steps.
Okay.
And flow charts of how to interpret the FDA requirements for whatever their product is. We also include a lot of technical information, like all of the standards that we are aware of at the time that could apply, all the guidance documents, so they are informed from a technical perspective, so that as they're moving through that process, that they continue to say, look at those standards and put those in their design inputs, or plan with their marketing people of, okay, here are our boundaries and all these guidance and standards. But we recently launched a new program that's called Lean REQ Launch. And we also have a Lean REQA Learn, but in the launch model, we're offering a certain number of hours with any of my experts that they need to talk to a month. And it has a couple of other features. And for less than $1,000, that's a way that I think that startups can engage, because it's not expensive. It's not going to break their bank, but then they get the advice they need when they need it, and they're paying for it, every month. So why not talk to me, because I made it affordable.
Yeah, because you got new people, new staff, right? New vendors,
Mhm.
all kinds of, there's
Yep.
many moving pieces during launch.
Exactly. And that
Product
also
operation,
happens a
feedback from the
lot.
client.
Like the people who were there when I did the initial RPA are not the ones, they've moved on, and now we've got all
Yeah.
kinds of fresh blood that have no idea about the history and aren't shared, and the CEO didn't share the RPA with them. So then you
Yeah,
have
like I can
engineering
see
going wild.
breakdowns, you know, the supply chain guys will have product coming back because packaging didn't withhold. You need that feedback, right? You need that information in the iteration. They go back, they change the product here, there, what have you. Yeah.
It sounds, if I'm right, it sounds like you're also asking about, you know, post-launch when you're actually selling, what type of support we could offer.
Right. I just,
There's a
yeah,
couple
because
of-
you're
Yeah.
at this point, you're trying to get, you need the feedback from the field, you need the feedback from the new
Exactly.
employees.
And you're gonna be
to
making
Stay in
changes.
compliance.
Exactly. So we can support you with the program that Michelle, you know, mentioned, but also we offer fractional quality support. So we can be looked at as a part of your quality team. And we can help be integrated into your processes and let you know as you go along, oh, you're getting into trouble here, you need to do this, you need to do that. So that's another
Mhm.
option if you need us
Yep.
more involved.
And similarly, we build into that price. First off, you get all the support and implementing services that we can offer. You could also get services from Renae. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
And the
Yeah, no,
commercial.
I get the range of
Commercialization.
services, like you're moving
Yep.
more front end.
So we're trying to like build in time
Yeah.
for like them to call us and whatnot, so that they treat us like we're part of the team, and they have to talk to us every month, at least once a month, because it's built into.
That's the cadence I was looking for. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's your top of mind, right? Top
Yep.
of mind awareness.
Yes.
Risk management has got to be, it's like an education cycle, right? You got to stay in
Yep.
the loop.
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah.
You know, I've got something I can chat with you about later. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's meet you and Renee talk, like
I
maybe
hadn't
next
heard
week.
that expression before, Toma.
Yeah, top of mind awareness.
I hadn't heard that
Framework of
acronym yet.
thinking. Yeah.
And anyone else? Yeah, Paul, you're making shit up.
No, man. Well, I do, but
Is there anything else before we talk about just wrapping this up and?
I have a quick question. Sorry, I always ask questions at the end. So when you were talking about the 1099 contractors for sales and exclusivity, I think that's an excellent idea, but how enforceable is it? Like, have you come across cases or where they were not actually exclusive, and the cost of litigation for that? Anybody can answer the question, but I'm just curious the pros and cons. Like, the pros are excellent, but what would be the cost associated with the breach of contract?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. So when we talk about like a 1099 or a distributor being exclusive, I mean the manufacturer is only selling that product through that entity, not reverse. Is that, I just want to make sure you're aligned on that.
Sorry, I'll reframe the question. I'm asking about the idea of having the sales. Maybe I misheard it, but I thought you were mentioning having sales team, some of them be 1099 contractors and fill out an exclusivity and then give them minimums that they have to sell. So if they breach that contract, what would be the cost for the organization, and is it worth it for them for that risk?
If you make somebody a 1099, you can't really demand exclusivity from them. It's sort of a violation of the idea. They become a de facto full-time employee when you demand exclusivity of a 1099. If you demand hours, if you demand this, if you demand that, so you really need to be careful with 1099s. I don't think you'd have a lot of recourse in that event.
So, and when I was talking about exclusivity, I meant I'm selling a product into the market. So that 1099 person is guaranteed, I'm telling them, George, you're the only one selling into Alabama. I'm not gonna let anybody else sell into Alabama, George. It's just you. So any work that you do, George, to gain business is all yours, but you're gonna have to sell at least $100,000 worth of product a year to maintain that exclusivity. So that's different.
Yeah.
Than what Sean is talking about. So when I
Okay.
say exclusivity, it's exclusive to the company, penetration into a region.
Okay,
Not
okay,
the-
that makes,
It's an excellent question. Yeah.
thank you
Thank you for
for
that. I'm
clarifying.
going to be clearer about that next time.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah, and as the resident sales guy, if I could, Patricia, it's a great question again, and Kevin, it's your point is really important because like you take states like California, they're very strict about the relationship and what you can and cannot do with your 1099s. Because the state wants to get their taxes, but managing full commission reps is really an art form. There's a lot of risk in doing it. The cost effectiveness is that it really works only when you support them, right, and give them the support they need, like materials and training and stuff for that. And then they can, and like Renae was saying, they can maintain the exclusivity if the revenue and the models are there. Because if they don't deliver, then it opens up very quickly, and you should keep them on a very tight leash.
Yeah. Yep. I know we're at the top of the hour. I'm just going to go through this super quickly. Secrets to success: define your target market right up front. So you're addressing all your regulatory, your product needs, even your marketing and your sales. File your IP to ensure you're protected early and reevaluate often, like we talked about. Align your regulatory path and your reimbursement strategy. We didn't talk a lot about that. That happens pretty early on. We didn't talk a lot about that today, but that's really critical. For those of you who sell devices, you know, one of the first things you're asked is, okay, what's the reimbursement for it? What's the code? What do we get reimbursed? Establish your commercialization plan and work it. And then I always recommend raising more money than you initially think you need, because this whole process is just more expensive. It's like a house project. You're like, oh, I'm going to go change that door out. I'll be done in 3 hours, and 9 hours and 10 trips to Home Depot later. There you are. Similar with medical devices. So, thank you, everyone. Any other questions?
No, but a statement. I've seen a few comments of thank you, this was great, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew that before you started, but I didn't know that you knew that. So thank you for that. And I hope folks can join us next week. We have a new guest. She's a friend I met, well, 10 years ago at Daniel Kraft's event in Hotel del Coronado. Her name is Dr. Amy Baxter, and she is going to talk about her product about resolving back pain, but also knows quite a bit about, and will comment on changes that we can expect from FDA and the National Institute of Health, which I think will be highly relevant for lots of folks.
I know we are past 12 o'clock, but can I have one quick question, please?
Sure.
What does the team think? Should we let Michelle Mitchell talk, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, John. The last thing Renae mentioned is the reimbursement. So now I have a question about that. So, for example, like for pressure injury care, lymphedema, and then lymphedema not have reimbursement for a few years. And then I believe last year, January, they started that. So now a lot of people are trying to get the code E0650 to 52. But whose responsibility to tie the code with the product? Is that a manufacturer or the distributor? Because they are asking each other. So who decide what code go with what system, what product?
You are asking such a good question. And it's a complex response. I'm going to oversimplify it for now, but I think we might benefit from a regulatory reimbursement kind of combo on this channel here soon. So typically, when you're going through like the regulatory process, if possible, we advise that you align your regulatory claims with product codes that are already, reimbursement codes that are already out there, so that, you know, when you launch the product, it can be reimbursed. In the meantime, there are ways, let's say you have an innovative product or you have a product that there's not really a reimbursement code for the indication for use. There are ways to work with CMS and actually work to have a code established for it, a specific indication.
Well,
But it's typically done, it's not done by the distributor, it's done typically by the people who are the actual creator of the product, the company that's trying to bring the product to market.
okay, because this product exists in the market for a long time, and because there was no Medicare reimbursement code for some time, so nobody's really interested. And now
Yeah.
suddenly, because I think CMS or DHS, I'm not sure which one, they published this guideline as to what code requires what specifications. And now
Yeah.
suddenly there are 3 codes out there, and everybody's interested in this particular 2 products actually, but they want the contracting manufacturer to say product A go with this code, product B go with this code, before you can provide us all the necessary reasoning for, satisfy the reimbursement code. Otherwise, we're not considering it. And so now we're trying to fit the product into the code. So it's kind of hard to justify because, it could range from $200 reimbursement to $4,000 reimbursement. So there's a huge gap. And you don't want to, I just don't think we should overstay our product, try to get the highest reimbursement, because personally, I don't think that's right. So there's some work need to be done. That's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah, and you cannot tell a hospital or any entity that's buying the product, hey, here's a code.
No.
You can get reimbursed. You cannot say that. You can say, here are a number of codes that may be used for this procedure. And, you need to validate through your processes here at your healthcare system as to what you're able to get reimbursed for. You have to be so careful about that.
Okay.
The other thing that is
Thank
really important too is work with your sales team. If they have people in the field, they have customers buying the product and they're trying these different codes, see if they will give feedback to say, oh yeah, I use code 85734 and it actually reimbursed at $300 when I used it.
Okay, thank you.
So get their feedback. Yeah, you're welcome. But
And
you're
thank you,
asking
everybody,
questions.
for letting me and ask the questions.
Anytime. Sean, you had something in the chat for folks, and I think we'll conclude there.
Okay. Yeah. So we're doing a new webinar next week, part 2 of getting your product paid for. So more detail on reimbursement codes, market access. Probably worth attending. I'm also going to do a post today on a 10x startup challenge. This is to induce more startups to attend the event. What we will do is we will write a feature article in MedTech Leading Voice about them in advance of the event, and then heavily discounted pricing is available for startups, because we want to make sure that we have a nice balance of startups in the room, but we can talk about details about pricing offline. I wanted to, if you know a startup that is a good candidate for possibly going to 10X, and they would like some exposure, they would like some media exposure, please, I'm going to share this with you, and then you can just put them in touch with me.
Yeah, Sean, I'd like to have a conversation with you on that.
Okay. Do you know my email or how to get a hold of me?
I'll find you on Slack.
Okay. Good. As Joe knows, I'm terrible on Slack, but
Oh, sorry. Then I don't.
I will just put my email in the chat right here.
Please.
Sorry everyone. Sean, I know we're
And then I had a question on the 10X discount price on the hotels. What's the cutoff on that?
It's typically the first week of April, actually, and every year I'm like, no, I really need more time, and they usually grant it, but depending on occupancy, sometimes they get a little persnickety, so I just put the link there.
Thank you.
I would suggest anyone who's even thinking about coming to go ahead and book a room, because you can cancel it like the day before.
Mhm.
That way, you'll
Okay, I'll
be
do that now.
guaranteed to get the good pricing. They do cut it rather significantly, so I suggest you take advantage of that.
And any of you that are thinking about attending, if I can push you over the edge by offering you a MedTech Leading Voice interview, then please take me up on that. I am always interested in learning about what people are doing and sharing it with the audience. So if we can, figure out a way to make that work, we'll make that work. Okay, that's it for me.
And me. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.